Yo, what's up guys, Alf here, and today I'm going to be doing a full in-depth deck breakdown of a deck that I've recently used to hit rank 11 with on the arena ladder. As you can see from the screenshot here, I'm currently 27-5 with this list, so it's been performing really well for me so far. Now having said that, the historic ladder has felt a little bit softer recently, so it has been more difficult with this list to determine whether it's tier 2 or better. Hopefully more testing will help me figure that out, but it has felt very strong for me so far, and all the new additions that we got from Foundations, especially these artifact lands and Thoughtcast, have been a really big buff to the archetype, and really felt like the deck is way more competitive now than it was previously. I'm also in the middle of writing a full in-depth deck guide article about this deck for MTG's own premium that will have a bunch more details, a full sideboard guide, how I change the deck with best of one, and some tips and tricks to help you play the deck as well. So as soon as that's finished and up, which should be out in the next couple days or so, I'll have a link to that down in the description as well, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But anyway, with that all out of the way, this is my Dimir Affinity deck in Historic. So obviously Affinity has been around in Historic for a really long time now, but it hasn't really been a competitive deck since Modern Horizons 3, just because all of the other decks just sped up so much. And even though we did get Kappa Cannoneer in Modern Horizons 3, which I think is one of, if not the best Affinity or Artifact payoffs that we've got in Historic, I just felt like the support cards to accelerate into Kappa Cannoneer just weren't good enough. I felt like the proactive game plan of Affinity just wasn't able to compete with decks like Auras, Mardu Sacrifice, 4-color Samwise, Boros Energy before it got nerfed, for example. So now with the addition of the Artifact lands, which is a huge buff to both speed and consistency, and Thoughtcast as well, I really feel like the deck can compete. So I'm going to start off here by having a look at the payoff cards. These are the kind of cards that we're trying to build around in order to accelerate into. So obviously Thought Monitor has been a cornerstone of these decks for a really long time, and that stays true here. Thought Monitor, absolutely incredible card in this deck, and now with the Artifact lands, we can accelerate into these a lot more quickly. We also now have Frogmite as well, which wasn't a card, this has kind of come out since Affinity was very popular, so we haven't really seen this see too much play, but with the Artifact lands in combination with our very cheap artifacts here, we can accelerate into Frogmite, which then helps us accelerate into Thought Monitor. And just keeping the cards flowing is really important because, as you can see here, we are running a lot of cheap artifacts in order to enable the Affinity payoffs here. And the obvious downside or the obvious risk of doing this is that you can often just end up getting stuck with a bunch of cheap artifacts in your hand, which means that in the early game, you can end up just emptying your hand really quickly and then running out of gas. So having Thought Monitor as a way to refuel is really big. And then having redundancy for this sort of effect with Thoughtcast is a really big deal as well. And the nice thing about Thoughtcast is it's a lot cheaper than Thought Monitor, so we can accelerate into this a lot quicker. So it just makes running a lot of cheap artifacts a lot less risky because we have 8 ways to just completely refuel and pay us off for getting a bunch of cheap artifacts into play. Then we've got Kappa Cannoneer, and this card has been so impressive. Now, now we can accelerate into it a little bit quicker. Now, obviously, the artifact lands don't actually help accelerate into Kappa Cannoneer itself, but the fact that we can accelerate into Frogmite, the fact that we can accelerate into Thought Monitor, makes getting Kappa Cannoneer down earlier even better. And this card is absolutely incredible. It's basically, it's basically impossible to destroy with single target removal because of the Ward 4, which is huge in basically every single matchup. And it grows so quickly, it can start attacking past whatever. This card is the reason why you can beat Mono Green Devotion, for example, because you can just get this down early, buff it up really quickly, and then just attack the opponent directly. And overall, this is just your main win condition. This is the card that you're going to be using to win the most games. So yeah, this card, it has been absolutely incredible so far. And now that we have faster ways to accelerate into it, it feels like the proactive game plan of Affinity is a lot better now. Then in terms of the other support cards, obviously we are running a lot of cheap artifacts. We've got the Ornithopter Retrofit Foundry package, which, obviously this is just a great turn 1 play, but this is also just another way that we can close games out. If we can get Retrofit Foundry Ornithopter online early, especially with Emery as a way to just rebuy it repeatedly, pumping out a bunch of 4/4s is a really effective way to close games out if you can't find Kappa Cannoneer early on, which is really nice. Ornithopter being 0 mana also just opens up some very, good first few turn plays. Like, if we have Seat of the Synod and Ornithopter, we can play Emery on turn 1. If we have multiples of these, we can get Frogmite down for 0 mana in the first couple turns. It was also a really nice enabler for Kappa Cannoneer as well. Honestly, if I could run 8 Ornithopter in this deck, I would, and I really wish we had Memnite in this deck. If we had Memnite instead of Frogmite, I think this deck would be so much faster, but we don't have that yet. But either way, Ornithopter pairs incredibly well with Retrofit Foundry, but also just enables all of our Affinity payoffs really nicely. Then additionally, we've got Retrofit Foundry, which is obviously excellent on turn 1 with Ornithopter, but it's also just really good at grinding into longer games as well, especially if you've got a lot of counter spells in, like against Control, because you can play this on turn 1, and then turn 2 you can hold up Metallic Rebuke, counter something if you need to, but if not, you can still pump your mana into the Foundry to produce a servo token, and making servo tokens every single turn is a really solid way of just discounting your affinity cards without needing any other artifacts. Oftentimes you can just keep making a survey every single turn to accelerate into your top end, and then if you've got these in multiples, you can start chaining through to the 4/4s really quickly as well. So Retrofit Foundry, excellent on turn 1 with Ornithopter, but also very good in longer games, and also just decent at enabling your affinity cards if you do have a slightly slower start as well, which is pretty nice. Then we've got Aether Spellbomb, which isn't a card I had in the deck initially, but my first few builds of this deck were just trying to maximize the proactive game plan and accelerate speed, so I was running stuff like Moonsnare Prototype and Springleaf Drum in this slot, which are definitely interesting cards in Affinity, but I don't feel this build can run Springleaf Drum. If we had Memnite instead of Frogmite, then I definitely would be interested in running it, but I just feel like we don't have enough cheap creatures to enable it. Only really Ornithopter and Emry, and occasionally Frogmite, but again, you need some acceleration to get into this for a start, which is a bit of an issue. And then Moonsnare Prototype is probably better in this list because we have a lot of non-creature artifacts, but producing colourless as opposed to coloured when we need blue for a lot of our payoffs was a bit awkward as well. And I also just really struggled to beat a lot of the other proactive decks, especially Boros Auras. I felt it was almost impossible to consistently race Boros Auras. They're just slightly quicker than you no matter what you do. So I really did feel like, and obviously there are a lot of other matchups in the format where you would ideally like to be able to deal with creatures as well. And Aether Spellbomb just seems like the best option that we have in this colour combination. If we were in white, you could definitely consider Portable Hole in this slot as well, but I actually think that Spellbomb could be better in the current metagame, especially when we're running Emry, because being able to bounce creatures at instant speed, especially against auras, is a really big deal, because obviously against auras, if you bounce their creature, they lose all of the auras on it, and it slows them down by a lot. And like I said, in a lot of these matchups where you are just trying to race, you are usually like a turn or two slower than a deck like Boros Auras, so just bouncing one of their creatures is often just the difference maker for you being able to race, or just buy you enough time. And then it also pairs incredibly well with Emry as well, being able to loop this every single turn, bounce a creature every single turn, or even if they're not playing creatures you want to be able to bounce, you can just crack this every single turn, basically just an engine here to draw an extra card every turn, which again might not seem that powerful in current Historic, but like I said, a lot of matchups do end up quite grindy, and being able to get ahead with a combo like Spellbomb Emry is really big. So Spellbomb has felt really big and gives you a real edge in a matchup like Auras that I was really struggling in previously. And then next up we got Blood Fountain, and this card has really impressed me. So this is a card I was excited to try. Obviously the main reason that we're running black here with blue is because we want to be able to run and utilize the extra 4 artifact lands in this deck, and having a high density of these really helps to accelerate into our top end, which is really big. So running black is a little bit awkward because white, like I said, gives you access to Portable Hole and Esper Sentinel, but one card that I was very excited to try out in black and has really impressed me is Blood Fountain, which on its face is essentially just 2 artifacts for 1 mana, which is just excellent in this deck, right? 2 artifacts for 1 mana is great, not only for our affinity payoffs, but it also helps us accelerate into Kappa Cannoneer as well. Starts where you have double Blood Fountain, really helps you accelerate into this on turn 3 very consistently, which is really huge. But actually all the other parts of this card have come up a lot. So like I said, one of the main reasons that I'm running this in the first place is because it's just 2 artifacts for 1 mana, but the Blood Token is really nice. You know, once you do start drawing through your deck with Thoughtcast and Thought Monitor, you are occasionally going to flood out sometimes if you have a lot of these draw to effects. So using the Blood Token to cycle away a land we don't need and look for something else is really nice. And then the ability to get 2 creatures back from the graveyard at instant speed, even though it's 4 mana, does come up in these kind of long grindy games where you can use it to rebuy Thought Monitors to draw cards, you can use it to rebuy Ornithopters to feed into the Retrofit Foundry, you can use it to rebuy Emry as well in longer matchups as well, and then obviously we can use it to bring back Kappa Cannoneer if it gets milled over by Emry or hit by a discard spell or something. So Blood Fountain is basically excellent at every part of the game. We really want this on turn 1 to accelerate into our top end, and then the other abilities it has is relevant as the game goes on as well. So I've been very impressed with Blood Fountain so far. The next up we've got Emry, and this is another card that I didn't have in my initial builds of the deck, but once I tried it out, I was just completely sold on this card, especially with Seat of the Synod as well, because now with Seat of the Synod, all we need is 1 Seat of the Synod and an Ornithopter, and we can play Emry on turn 1, which is a very powerful play, and if the opponent doesn't have a removal spell for it, this can just take over the game. But yeah, this can rebuy so many high impact cards. Getting back Retrofit Foundry gives you a really strong engine. If you have Foundry, getting back Ornithopter is really good. If we have Affinity payoffs, getting back Ornithopter or Frogmite, if we can cast it for 0 mana, can be the difference between, improvising a Kappa Cannoneer or not that turn, or being able to cast a Thoughtcaster or a Thought Monitor. So getting back our zeros is really big. Getting back Spellbomb is huge in matchups like Auras where you want to be able to bounce their creatures repeatedly. Getting back Blood Fountain, similar to Ornithopter, is another way that we can accelerate, with a Kappa Cannoneer. This essentially acts as ramp off Emry, which is really nice as well. And then post-sideboard, we can use it to rebuy stuff like Tormod's Crypt as well to just loop Graveyard Hate. So Emery is just a really, really good card, especially with the addition of Seat of the Synod, and will take over the game. And the other really nice thing about it as well is that Kappa Cannoneer and Thought Monitor are powerful top-end cards, are artifacts themselves, so these can also be replayed from the graveyard. So Emery, absolute all-star, and just basically demands an immediate answer from the opponent, or it can just snowball the game really quickly. Then we got Metallic Rebuke in the main deck, and this is just a must for me because it just works really well with our proactive game plan anyway. This is very consistently going to be a 1-mana counterspell, especially because all we need, for example, is just a Blood Fountain, and all we need to hold up is blue mana for the rest of the game, and this is a 1-mana counterspell, so works very well with our proactive game plan. But I also feel it's very, very important to have main deck counterspells as a way for us to fight against control, because control is probably your scariest matchup with this deck, especially now we have 8 artifact lands, because they have Fragment Reality and Prismatic Ending, which can both take out your artifact lands, and also, more importantly, Divine Purge and Wrath of the Skies not only kill all of your artifacts and creatures, but also wipe out your artifact lands as well. So having some main deck counter spells gives you decent counterplay to that, which is nice as well, because I feel like a lot of the, especially Jeskai Control and Historic right now, aren't main decking that many sweepers because they're running the Strict Proc to Stifle package. And then obviously in the sideboard, we've got some additional counter spells to help fight there as well. But Rebuke just works very well with our proactive game plan, gives us another angle of attack, helps improve our matchups against the combo decks as well. So Rebuke, just excellent card there as well. Then Frogmite, kind of gone over this already, but just another good way to accelerate. Getting this to 0 mana then really helps us accelerate into Kappa Cannoneer and Thought Monitor, which is pretty nice, and is another big reason to be running the artifact lands as well. And then the rest of the main deck we've kind of gone over already, so mana base wise, not too much to talk about here. 20 lands has felt like a decent amount. You really don't want to be running too many lands in this deck because we have a lot of draw to effects, and we really don't want to be casting a Thoughtcaster or a Thought Monitor and just drawing 2 lands in most scenarios. And to be honest, this is a deck that can operate fairly well off just a single land. Obviously ideally we want to be finding 2, but I've won a decent amount of games off just fast acceleration starts and 1 or 2 lands, so you really don't need that many lands. The rest of the lands are just all the dual lands and a basics. I do feel like we really do need to be running pure dual lands here, because we do need black on turn 1 for Fatal Push and Blood Fountain, and we do need blue on turn 1 for stuff like Miscast and Spell Pierce as well, and also obviously Emery if we have double Ornithopter, or we have Seat of the Synod Ornithopter as well. So and also later in the game, you do often want multiple blue, right? You want sometimes Metallic Rebuke and Miscast and Spell Pierce, and then you want to be able to cast multiple Thought Monitors and Thought Casts and Kappa Cannoneers as well. So I feel like running the actual dual land is important, because, one awkward thing about Vault of Whispers is it can make it difficult to cast multiple blue spells in the same turn. So I do feel like basically it's better to run Underground River over the Pathways, for example, for that reason. And then moving on to the sideboard here, starting off with a couple copies of Tormod's Crypt, and this was actually a card that I tested in the main deck over Frogmite, just because 0 mana artifacts are so useful at discounting our Affinity cards and helping us cast turn 1 Emery, for example, but it just felt like it lowered the card quality too much. I think if main deck Graveyard Hate was good against other meta decks, like if Shifting Woodland was really popular, or Kethis combo is still seeing play, for example, then I'd be more interested in this, but it just felt like the vast majority of decks in Historic right now don't really care about the main deck Tormod's Crypt, really, so you're essentially just running this as a 0 mana artifact with no text in a lot of matchups, which I don't think is good enough. Again, if we had Memnite in the format, then I definitely think I would be running that over Frogmite instead, but I don't really think it's worth main decking Tormod's Crypt. But in this sideboard, we definitely do want Graveyard Hate, and this is just the best in slot. Like I said, I was considering this in the main deck just because it's a 0 mana artifact, so if I am facing a deck like Shifting Woodland, for example, this is an excellent card there as well. Then we got 2 copies of Pithing Needle, so this is here for 2 main matchups. First of all, I really like this against Mono Green Devotion, usually naming Kiora just to slow their acceleration down, but obviously you can use it to name Khan as well, especially if you draw the second one. And then I also really like this against the Sacrifice decks. Obviously against the 4-color deck, you can use this to name either Cauldron Familiar or Goblin Bombardment, and if I'm against Mardu Sacrifice, I'm basically just using this to name Goblin Bombardment, because that is just, I think, probably the best card, or the most scary card in their deck for sure. And then obviously you can bring this in other matchups. You can name Shifting Woodland against the Woodland deck, so bring this in alongside Tormod's Crypt there. And obviously more fringe decks like Kethis and Yawgmoth that you occasionally see, this is nice as well, but mainly here for the Sacrifice decks and Mono Green Devotion. Speaking of the Sacrifice decks, I also have 3 Stone of Irak here, which is just the best card against all of the Sacrifice decks. Against the 4-color decks, this shuts off the Samwise combo for a start, but it also shuts off all the death triggers on Unlucky Witness and Trap Finder, shuts off Ajani from flipping as well, which is a big way that other decks can go over the top of you. And then again, you know, against the Mardu deck, shuts off Ajani flipping, shuts off all the death triggers, shuts off the Marionette Apprentice death trigger, which is another way that they can potentially race you even once you're ahead on board as well. So this card is just excellent. 3 copies just because you want to draw it as often as possible. The games where you have this in play versus the games where you don't, it's just night and day really. So having 3 Stone of Erect, 2 Pithing Needle really takes the sting out of a lot of those sacrifice decks for sure. And then next up, I've got 2 Miscasts and 2 Spell Pierce. So this is basically here for the control matchups where we really need to have counterplay to Wrath of the Skies and Divine Purge. Fragment Reality is also a card you need to be aware of. So if you are against a control deck and you're worried about Fragment, it's always better to run out your non-artifact lands first so they don't just get to Stone Rain you for 1 mana on turn 1, which is really brutal. But like I said, the main cards we're worried about are Divine Purge and Wrath of the Skies. So I just wanted more counterplay here. I've chosen to go for a split here just because I feel like Spell Pierce is more applicable in other matchups, right? If you queue into a deck like Belcher, for example, you really want to be able to hit their proactive cards. Miscast specifically is obviously way better against the sweepers, which is the main thing that we're worried about. But Spell Pierce, being able to bring it in other matchups is pretty nice as well. And also there will be some spots where you want to be able to use this to counter something like a Teferi, for example. So I like these as my main counterplay to sweepers. Obviously there are other options you consider. I did initially start out with Thoughtseize, for example, because that can also be used in other matchups like Auras, but specifically against Auras, I was only really bringing in Fatal Push. I didn't really need this slot as well, but you could consider Thoughtseize as well if you're worried about the taxing effect kind of running out later in the game. But the issue with Thoughtseize over the counter spells here is if the opponent has multiple sweepers or they draw into a sweeper, then you're in trouble there as well. Whereas these counter spells, they work very well alongside Retrofit Foundry, so oftentimes you're not wasting mana to hold it up, and it forces the opponent to invest the mana in it as well, so it's a much bigger tempo loss for the opponent as well. So these are my current setup, but you could consider other cards as well in this slot if you wanted to. But I do feel like you need 8 cards in the 75 to be able to consistently counter your Divine Purge and Wrath of the Skies. And then finally, we just got 4 copies of Fatal Push, just the most efficient creature removal that we have in black. And this is obviously going to be very important against decks like Boros Auras for a start. This is definitely your best sideboard card in that matchup. And having 4 Spell Bomb, 4 Fatal Push post sideboard does help you slow them down enough to get ahead in the majority of situations. Obviously, you might need to mulligan towards these a little bit more aggressively if you don't have a fast start of your own, but very useful there. And then just any other creature matchups. You know, especially against decks that run these tax effects like Hushbringer or Strict Proctor, which shut off your Kappa Cannoneers and your Thought Monitors, having Fatal Push alongside Spellbomb or just instead of Spellbomb in a lot of matchups is really important to be able to take those sorts of cards out. So anyway, that's the deck overall. Like I said, it's felt really strong to me. Again, like I said, the Historic Ladder has felt a little bit soft, so I'm really not sure where this sits between Tier 2 and Tier 1. I do think it's at least a Tier 2 deck. Hopefully I'll have to test it some more and be able to come to a more concrete version of it, but either way, the deck's felt really nice. This is definitely the strongest Affinity's felt for me so far, and it does feel like it has good tools to beat most of the top decks in the format right now. You know, like I said, we've got Fatal Push and Spellbomb to give us a fighting chance against the Auras deck. Stone of Erech and Pithing Needle is excellent against the Sacrifice decks. Mono Green Devotion really struggles to beat Kappa Cannoneer, so if you can get this down early, they really struggle to be able to beat that. Obviously, you do need to be wary of Khan in that matchup as well, because it does shut off your artifact lands, but Kappa Cannoneer is very difficult for the Devotion decks to beat. So I do feel like it has good tools to beat, you know, the vast majority of decks in the format right now, which is a very good sign. And next up, I've just got some matches that I was playing with it on the ladder so you guys can see it in action. If you've got any questions about the deck at all, definitely let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoy the video. Big up! Okay, so we're going first here, and one landers are always risky. We really want to find the second land here, but we do have a ton of acceleration here, right? We've got Blood Fountain into Ornithopter, which puts 3 artifacts in play on turn 1, which means, you know, Thoughtcast is already going to go down to 2 mana. We can cast Emery even if we don't draw another land here, which is pretty sweet as well. So, and then, you know, if Emery mills over a Frogmite or another Ornithopter, we can cast that for free, which then unlocks Thoughtcast for a single mana. So even if we don't draw our second land here, I think we have enough potential lines that we can probably get away with it. So definitely going to run out the Blood Fountain here, and then I think it's not worth running out the Ornithopter. We don't have any cards like Machiko's Reign of Truth or Ensoul Artifact that incentivize incentivizes us to have Ornithopter in play early here. And if I do run out the Ornithopter, it just gives the opponent a target for their removal spell. So I'm going to hold on to it until I need to cast it out to get the benefit from the Affinity. So now we will play it out. We'll cast Thoughtcaster, draw 2 here. And then, not the best draws here. Getting another artifact land is nice with Thought Monitor, but drawing extra Emeries, especially when we're up against auras here, where they're unlikely to have removal unless they have Sheltered by Ghosts on 2. Oh, they do have the Sheltered by Ghosts on 2. I'm actually kind of happy to see that. Obviously, you know, having extra Emeries in hand is nice in this scenario, but I think without a Spell Bomb here, it's actually nicer here for me to... you know, for them not to cast like a Light Pause or a Spirit Dancer, because now we have time to dig towards a Spell Bomb, and I'm definitely going to run out the Emery here, because if we do mill over a Spell Bomb, which unfortunately we don't, okay, so again, the Spell Bomb is just the most important card in this matchup to buy time. Now, having said that, if the opponent doesn't find the Demonic Ruckus, then I think we've got a decent chance of just being able to, you know, stonewall their attacks every single turn, because we've got Ornithopter, we can get Retrofit of Foundry back from the graveyard with Emery. So they attack in here. We're definitely going to block with Thought Monitor, because then we can just rebuy it with Emery from the graveyard, which gives us, you know, essentially a divination every single turn. And now we've got enough artifact lands in play that we can just cast it for a single mana here, which is nice. So again, we're just trying to dig towards Aether Spellbomb here if we can. Oh, perfect. We find it. Okay, so... interesting. I think I'm going to cast another Thought Monitor here. Actually, maybe that was a mistake, because I really... okay, we found a Metallic Rebuke as well. I do definitely want to get Spellbomb into play here. But if we pay for the Sentinel tax, which I think I'm going to do when the opponent only has 3 cards in hand, maybe that was a mistake, though. Actually, I think it was potentially a mistake. I think I'm meant to... I'm probably supposed to not cast that Thought Monitor and just play the Spellbomb, pay the tax, and hold the mana open, because holding a blue open here means that we have Spellbomb up, and if the opponent has Light Pause into Hammerhand, that could be a real issue. Okay, they got Ruckus, so they could still get a Hammerhand here and give it haste. So yeah, I think it was probably a misplay to pay the tax at that point. I'm supposed to... yeah, they do get the Hammerhand, so I think I'm supposed to hold the Spellbomb mana open here. So I think I did probably make a slight misplay there. It's always hard to say with this deck, though, because you have so many options every single turn. I still think we're in a decent position, though. You know, we can loop Spellbomb with Emery here, so we could potentially bounce the Light Pause. I don't think we have enough mana to bounce the Light Pause and the Giver of Runes because of the ward here, so I think I'm going to replay the Thought Monitor just to ensure that we're completely ahead in terms of card advantage. And now this turn we do need to hold the Spellbomb up. Now obviously they do have the Giver of Runes, so they can protect the Light Pause with the Spellbomb. So thinking back on it, maybe I did misplay. Maybe I'm supposed to just bounce the Light Pause and then use Emery to replay the Spellbomb. Okay, opponent just scoops it up. Yeah, they probably can't beat Spellbomb in this situation anyway, but yeah, that was an interesting game. I'm definitely going to rewatch that one. So here, I think Rebuke is just too slow against auras. I'm going to bring in the Fatal Pushes. So now we've got four Fatal Push, 4 Spellbomb, and that should be good. Wait, hold on. Why is the... I'm clicking on the done button, but it's just not doing anything. Oh, I've had this happen a couple of times. Maybe the opponent just quit out. Oh, okay. Quit. So yeah, opponent just quit out. So we got there, nice, but I would have liked to play the post-sideboard games, obviously. Okay, so we're on the play here. And yeah, this hand looks good to me. Right, we got turn 2 Emery here. Seat of the Synod plus Spellbomb, and what we mill over from Emery should hopefully help discount these Thoughtcasts pretty quickly as well. So opponents on Lurus obviously could be a number of decks. Could be Auras, could be 4-color, could be Mardu. I don't think it really affects what we're going to be doing in the first few turns, but... okay, Unlucky Witness. So this is either going to be Mardu or 4-color here. So I'm going to run out the Emery here, see what we hit. Okay, wow, that's a really sick hit. So Blood Fountain is obviously really good at discounting stuff in our hand. If we want to go for multiple blue spells, we could also just run out an Ornithopter here as well. So yeah, very happy to see that. Okay, so Amped Raptor, Basic Swamp. Okay, yeah, we're definitely against Mardu now. I was going to say Basic Swamp makes me think we're probably against Mardu rather than 4-color. Which I think is probably I think Mardu's probably slightly better because we don't have to contend with the combo game 1, which is pretty important. So... Here it's going to be either Blood Fountain or Ornithopter. It just depends whether we want to invest one of our 2 lands into the Blood Fountain. I think we do here, though, because it immediately discounts Thoughtcast to a single mana here. Really hope we find another land off the top. Okay, we do. And then, I think we just have to hold the Rebuke open here, right? If we get a good target, then that can save us a lot of damage, especially if we stop a Goblin Bombardment here. That would be game... Well, it probably wouldn't be game-winning, but it would definitely stop us from losing the game. Now, having said that, this is a matchup where we want to look after our life total because of stuff like Marionette Apprentice and Goblin Bombardment, but I don't think there's much that we could really do to stop taking that 5 damage in that spot, really. I guess if we'd have played Ornithopter, that would have given us another blocker. Here I'm going to go for Frogmite because we don't have Retrofit Foundry, and I think a 2/2 is more valuable as a blocker here. But we get to get the Thought Monitor down. We could have maybe run out the Kappa Cannoneer there, potentially, but I think it just makes more sense to get more blockers in play. And then I'm kind of tempted to keep Spellbomb up. I'm also kind of tempted to run out the Kappa Cannoneer here. I think I want to go for Cannoneer because I think it just makes more sense for us to start actively trying to close the game out if we can. Because once you've got a Kappa Cannoneer in play, you can usually kill within a turn or two, especially when we have, Thought Monitor, Vault of Whispers in hand already. Again, this does leave us with fewer blockers back, which is a little bit awkward, but we can't just keep playing defense, especially against the deck that has good reach in the late game, because once we get down to a relatively low life total, once they have Marionette Apprentice in play, it's going to be really tricky to survive, basically. So I think getting Kappa Cannoneer down, generally you want to get it down as soon as possible if you're not just going to be dead on the swing back. Okay, Ajani is rough here, though, because they can obviously sacrifice the cat token to Phyrexian Tower, flip the Ajani, and then start dealing a lot of damage. Now, thankfully, we did get Kappa Cannoneer in play. I guess we got Thought Monitor as well. But even if we didn't have the Thought Monitors here, we could just use the Kappa Cannoneer because it gets unblockable to attack down the Ajani. I'm surprised they sacrificed 2 creatures there, because that means that they're going to be dealing us fewer damage off the Ajani trigger. I guess they could have another creature here, though. And obviously, them using up the treasure deals us the damage off the Apprentice as well, so yeah, we do need to be very wary of our life total here. I think keeping... Oh, wow, they go after the Emery. That's huge. I'm very happy about that. But yeah, I think we'd need to repeatedly keep Spellbomb mana open from now on, because bouncing Apprentice in response to blocks is probably going to save us here. I think I feel like we do kind of want to get Emery down as well. I kind of want to play this Thoughtcast, but maybe that was a bit risky, because now... Yeah, I think that was actually a little bit risky, because now we're potentially having to take a damage off the Underground River when we didn't need to beforehand. Yeah, I think playing that Thoughtcast was a mistake. We do get another Kappa Cannoneer down. I do think we still probably have enough blocks. So I'm going to attack like this just to try and put them dead the next turn. I'm going to rewatch this turn. I feel like I might have... Well, first start, I'm really not happy about having to take damage off this Underground River. I feel like, 1 life point, especially when we're at 7, could make a huge amount of difference here. Wow, okay, second Marionette Apprentice, I'm not sure we're living this turn. Even if we left more creatures back to block, I'm not sure it makes a difference, because, we've got 3 creatures back to block, they've got 4 attackers, but we're going to be bouncing the Marionette Apprentice this turn, I imagine, so I don't think the attack was too reckless, but I think playing the Thoughtcast probably was, right? If we just play a Vault of Whispers out, and we have Underground River and another blue source that doesn't cause us to take damage, then we'd be a lot safer. And I don't think we necessarily really needed to play the Thoughtcast here. So, wow, I think we're just dead here, though. Right, we can still bounce the Marionette Apprentice, but they can force us to block at least one of their creatures to take 1, and then they can just sacrifice the treasure token to kill us. So I'm pretty sure we're dead here. But I always make my opponent play out these sorts of situations, because I've been in this situation, or this sort of situation from the opponent's side, and miss lethal before, so I always make them play it out from these sorts of spots anyway. So yeah, we're just dead here. All they need to do is just attack with everything. Maybe, yeah, attack with everything. We bounce one of the Marionette Apprentices. Or they could probably hold back with one of the, yeah, just don't attack with the Marionette Apprentice, I reckon. Force us into blocks it. Okay, they do attack with the Marionette Apprentice, but yeah, regardless of what we do here, I mean, we're definitely going to feed one of these Thought Monitors into the Amped Raptor, because then that denies them one of the Apprentice triggers. Then we can block the 2-1 with the 5-5, bounce one of the Apprentices in response, obviously the one that's attacking to save a life. But we're taking 2 here, and all they have to do is crack a treasure token and we're dead. Maybe they just forget that treasure token is lethal here. I mean, they should have cracked it before the bounce, but... So maybe they miss it? We get down to 1 here. All they have to do is crack a treasure and we lose. Okay, they missed it. I'm just really hoping they don't figure it out this turn. I mean, we have lethal on board. But I guess cracking a treasure token if you don't have anything to cast... Wow, they scoop it up. Okay. That's why you should never concede in spots like that. The opponent does miss lethal. I've done it a lot of times, especially with sacrifice decks where there are a ton of different lines you might not see. So here we definitely want the Stone of Urek and the Pithing Needle. I think Rebuke is still a reasonable card in this matchup, but I just... You know, most of their threats are too efficient for it, really, I think. So I prefer Spell Bomb. Again, a lot of their stuff has ETBs, but... I feel like against Mardu specifically, where you don't have to worry about the combo, just buying yourself a bit of time can make a big difference in this matchup. So, another card I also considered in the sideboard is a single copy of Shadow Spear for matchups like this, where they have good reach in the late game that you can equip to the Kappa Cannoneer. But I feel like if you got Cannoneer online, you're probably going to be in a great spot anyway. So here, this is a spot where I'm seriously considering going Vault of Whispers first, because then if we draw a Seat of the Synod off the top, we can potentially cast Thoughtcast next turn, but Mardu sideboards into Fragment Reality, and then fragmenting your artifact land on turn 1 is pretty bad. And like, I think with Seat of the Synod being the only draw that really matters here, it's probably best to play around Fragment Reality. Okay, it didn't end up mattering, thankfully. So going to run out of Retrofit Foundry here, and then we can just cast Thoughtcast straight away, which is really nice. And then got a few options next turn. I think just getting Kappa Cannoneer down is probably the best. Generally, getting that down early, especially when you're not under immediate pressure, is huge. Okay, they do have a Ajani, which is pretty awkward, because now they can obviously flip that at instant speed if they have a Village Rites. Doesn't look like they do, because Arena's giving away priority. Okay, Frogmite's pretty nice here. We've got a few options, so we can go Frogmite into Cannoneer into Emery now because of that top deck, which I think is definitely the best line here. Because Cannoneer and Emery are both cards that are really impactful to get down early, so getting them both down this turn here is really nice. Yeah, I think Emery's definitely the better card, especially because we definitely want to have an artifact in hand to trigger the Cannoneer. Obviously, we have the Retrofit Foundry in play, so even if we didn't have another artifact in hand, we could obviously just preemptively make a Servo token to trigger the Cannoneer. Okay, there's Bombardment. So that's pretty scary, obviously. Okay, they're attacking with everything. So I think we're blocking the Amped Raptor and the Trap Finder here. If they want to flip the Ajani, they have to sacrifice the 2-1 token anyway. So I think I'm just not going to block that one. Doesn't really make any difference in terms of the damage we're taking here, right? I mean, obviously we want the Emery to survive if possible, so I'm not just going to straight block the 2-1. But I think this is probably the best blocks we have. Okay, they have Deadly Dispute. That's fine. So I presume they sacrifice the 2-1 to kill the Emery, flip the Ajani here. See if they've got anything else to cast off the treasure as well. And I'm not sure if they've played a land this turn yet or not. Okay, there's Trap Finder, so they could also sacrifice that to kill the Emery, but I think it probably makes more sense to flip the Ajani first. if they're going to do it. Obviously, the Ajani is going to be very vulnerable to Cap Cannoneer the following turn, but... Oh, they bring back Amped Raptor, which is interesting. I feel like surely it would be better to get back Trap Finder here. Unless they really value the first strike for some reason, because... Wow, they take out the Emery. Surely it's best for them to go face with the 3 damage and then... Because presumably they have to sacrifice the Trap Finder before end step here. They could have just sacked the Trap Finder to deal a damage. Yeah, they messed up there. They should have gone 3 face, 1 damage to the Emery. But again, you know, these sorts of decks are pretty complicated. I still make mistakes like this all the time. But yeah, we're going to run out the Thought Monitor here, see what we draw. Obviously losing Emery is a bit of a blow, but we can still trigger the Cannoneer pretty consistently with the Foundry. Wow, okay, we're flooding out a little bit. Thankfully, we've got Blood Fountain as another mana sink here. But we do need to be wary of our life total, right? We're already down to 12. At least we can crack a blood token here to try and find something else. Wow, another land. So drawing fairly poorly here, but we still have a Cap Cannoneer in play. And, you know, I think we can get it up, you know, boost its power pretty quickly here. Either via, you know, rebuying stuff with the Blood Fountain or the Retrofitter Foundry. So as long as the opponent doesn't have a crazy turn here, I think we've got a decent chance of trying to force lethal. Maybe not next turn, but the turn after. Oh, wow, that's another Ajani. So this is... The opponent can probably kill us here, I imagine, right? They can flip the Ajani with... Oh, wow, okay. They've just got another Ajani in hand as well. I was going to say they can use Chthonian Nightmare, sacrifice the token to bring back the Ajani from the graveyard. And then they get 2 flips, which is like, you know, an extra 5-6 damage off the token entering. And then they can obviously sack their board as well. So again, like last game, I'll make them play it out just in case they miss the line here, but... I think we're almost certainly dead here, which is a little bit unfortunate. Again, had we drawn Stone of Urek, had we drawn Pithing Needle, I think we're squarely ahead in this game, but we just weren't able to find them, unfortunately. I mean, the nice thing about having 5 of them is that, in total, is that you do have a pretty high chance or a pretty high likelihood of being able to find them off Emery, off your 8 redraw effects, off the looting, off Blood Fountain. Like we do have a lot of ways to dig towards them, and they obviously as artifacts will help set up our proactive game plan as well. While they're going after Thought Monitor, okay, so maybe if they decide to take out all of our creatures here, we might get kind of lucky. But again, I'm pretty sure this 5 damage is going to go face, and then they'll surely just start pinging us directly now, I imagine. Yeah, okay, so we scoop it up there. So that was a little bit unfortunate. I think, again, if we got Stone of Urek or Pithing Needle down, we would have been good. They do have counterplay, obviously. They do have Fragment Reality, but if they use Fragment Reality on Stone of Urek or Pithing Needle, we're running Ornithopter, so that will just give us a free artifact in play, which is good for us. So Fragment Reality as counterplay to these sorts of cards isn't actually that great. So that first hand was a little bit awkward. This one I'm actually kind of tempted to keep, which is... might seem crazy, but we've got an artifact land and Stone of Urek. We've got Thoughtcast. We're very far away from casting Kappa Cannoneer, so I'm going to put that back. And again, Fragment Reality is something that I am concerned about. Maybe, I don't know. I feel like if they have Fragment Reality, they might use it on Stone of Urek instead of the artifact land, so maybe it's worth going Seat of the Synod first, just in case we draw another one. Oh, wow, we did. We got punished for it then. So yeah, if we'd led on Seat of the Synod, we could have gone for Thoughtcast on turn 2 here. Which, looking back on it, I think... it's probably best for me to run out Seat of the Synod there, because if they do have Fragment Reality, they're using it on our land rather than the Stone of Urek, which I think is the better card to have in play, especially when we have enough lands to keep playing them. Wow, okay, we draw Pithing Needle so we can shut off the bombardment here as well. So, yeah, looking back on it, turn 1, we probably should have led on the artifact land. But, you know, hindsight's 2020. It's easy to say that when you end up top decking the exact card for that. Okay, so Amtrak into a Johnny's pretty good, but you know, we've shut off the bombardment and the death triggers. So as long as we can find some creatures, which we do, then I think we're good here, right? We can play Blood Fountain into double Thought Monitor here, which is great. Keeps the cards flowing, gets some blockers in play. Should make it really difficult for the opponent to go over the top of us. Wow, okay, Kappa Cannoneer, sick draw now. So now we're squarely ahead. You know, opponent did actually have a reasonable start. Like Bombardment into Raptor into Ajani is not bad, but you know, we have the counterplay. We drew the Needle and the Stone of Eurek this game, and then, you know, this deck can be very, very explosive once you've got your synergies online. Okay, Unlucky Witness again, not worried about that at all because of the Stone. So yeah, I'd be very surprised if we ended up losing this one now. I feel like we've got all of their top ends just locked down now. So we can go Thought Monitor. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops up. So we got there, nice. Okay, I think I faced this person fairly recently, and I believe they were playing Mono Green Devotion with kind of more of a creature beatdown game plan. We'll have to see. Okay, I mean, this hand is good if we can draw any other setup card, to be honest. Right, if we can draw another cheap artifact, then we can get Thought Monitor online. I'm going to put back the Kappa Cannoneer here, but maybe I moved too quickly there. Actually, thinking about it, I'm probably supposed to put back a land, I think. I'm not 100% sure, though. Okay, so it does look like they're on Devotion. I'm going to run out the Ornithopter now that we know they're not on Devotion, and we obviously need it in play to enable Metallic Rebuke as well. Wow, nothing on turn 2, so they kept a pretty slow hand, but wow, Cannoneer off the top, really not what we're looking for here. We really need more setup. Okay, we're going to snap off the Rebuke on Cura here. One of their best cards, very happy to trade with that. Okay, we did draw another cheap artifact, but that's still not enough. So yeah, maybe this hand was a mull thinking about it. If we don't draw another cheap artifact quickly, then it's not that great. And even if we did draw another cheap artifact, it still doesn't even enable the Thought Monitor straight away, so... Oh, wow. Okay, I mean, Rebuke isn't the worst here, really, but we can't use it to stop the Brawler. Them plotting it is actually really bad for us. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to look this one back, but I don't know. I kind of feel like it was a mistake to keep this hand. I'm probably supposed to go down to 5. I mean, having said that, I really don't like going down to 5 with this deck if I can avoid it, because you do need kind of a high density of resources to get going. But I guess you do still have some pretty broken starts if you have, like, you know, Blood Fountains into Thought Casts or whatnot. So, okay, so thankfully the opponent also had a slow start, though. If they had a quick start, we'd probably got really punished for keeping this hand. But, you know, thankfully they were a little bit slow to get off the ground here. Okay, so they run out Boseiju, that's fine. They attack. Definitely not going to take the trade here. Aether Spellbomb does look like it could come in useful here. So either way, we're going to run out the Thought Monitor here. Now we've got our engines online. We should be good to go. Okay, Blood Fountain's a really nice pickup here. So I think we run out the Seat. Thought Monitor first, just to see if we hit like a counter spell or whatnot. But we also kind of want to use the Aether Spellbomb as well, I think. So we're going to attack with the Cannoneer here, and then I think we need to bounce now, just to deny them mana off Nykthos. Obviously, we could wait for them to cast another creature, then bounce the Brawler so they don't get the tokens. But if we do that, we let them get an extra, you know, essentially 2 mana off Nykthos for free. So I think it makes sense to bounce it now. And this is another matchup where I've actually found Spellbomb to be pretty useful, especially game 1. Now, again, a lot of their creatures have ETBs, especially if they have Trailblazer or Cura, but oftentimes that can be the difference between, you know, buying yourself a turn or 2 just to attack him for lethal. And obviously, you know, they do get more value every time they recast something, but they have to invest more mana into it. Okay, so they cycle Nykthos here. Let's see what else they've got. 6 mana, so they could still have a pretty explosive turn here. Storm the Festival. So, I mean, Karn is good against us in this spot because it just shuts off 2 of our lands, but Karn doesn't really have anything great that can answer Kappa Cannoneer, so even in this position, I'm not really sure that it would do all that much, and especially because even if we weren't close to lethal here, we could have just attacked the Karn down with the Kappa Cannoneer anyway, so Karn is definitely a card to be wary of when you're playing this deck, because it does shut down, you know, Artifact Lands, it shuts down Retrofitter Foundry, shuts down Blood Fountain and Spellbomb as well. But if you can get Kappa Cannoneer down before they can get Karn down, then you're pretty much, you know, it's very difficult for them to beat that. in most situations anyway. So here we can go Blood Fountain, Kappa Cannon. I mean, opponent's dead anyway, but we might as well just try and do the optimal lines here. And then we can play the other Blood Fountain. And yeah, just attacking for lethal. So Sideboarding against Devotion, we definitely want the Pithing Needles here. I really like them. Usually naming Cura, but sometimes naming Khan. And then I think I'm going to cut Spell Bombs, or... it's tricky. I have a feeling... Yeah, so they are on like more of a creature beatdown version. So I'm more inclined to keep the Spell Bombs in. I mean, especially on the draw, I think Rebuke could be a little too slow, but that could be incorrect. I could see doing the other way around. I think you're either supposed to cut Rebuke or Spell Bomb. Maybe one of each could be even better, perhaps. But either way, I definitely like the Pithing Needles here. Okay, so this hand looks a lot better. We actually have some good early game stuff, right? So we should be, you know, able to get things going straight away, unlike last game. Which, thinking back on it, probably was too risky of a keep. Okay, no Utopia Sprawl is really good to see. So we get to run out the Retrofit Foundry here, and then we can just go... I'm trying to think whether it's best to hold open Rebuke or go for Emery next turn. Okay, so they drew Sprawl off the top. Interesting. I think I'm just going to ship it back because they have so many good turn 3 or 4... Well, so many 3 or 4 mana plays that we want to be able to hit with the Rebuke. Tyvar, I think we'll snap off at that, right? That can... The activated ability on that, we don't have a really good way to stop, so... So here we can go Ornithopter. And I definitely think we want to get Emery down. You know, now we don't... The opponent doesn't have anything crazy in play, really. We can get both the Spell Bombs down. Turn this Ornithopter into a 4/4, then we can get, you know, Ornithopter or Frogmite back from the graveyard, play the Thought Monitor, and then, you know, we've still got these Spell Bombs here to potentially bounce this Cavalier if we just want to keep the opponent off tempo. I mean, obviously the risk is that they can recast it and then potentially mill over a Storm the Festival, but... Okay, Blood Fountain's a pretty interesting draw, so now we can go Blood Fountain, Thought Monitor, and... You know, just use this Emery to get back an Ornithopter, most likely. And then I think... I mean, we'll see what we draw here. Okay, interesting. So we could get back Thought Monitor from the graveyard now, actually. And still have a mana spare to bounce the Cavalier. We could have also gone Spellbomb, bounce the Cavalier, replay the Spellbomb, potentially. I think I'm going to hold on to this Artifact land because we already have enough artifacts in play for all of our Affinity cards, and... Holding on to it means that we don't get as punished hard by... we don't get punished as hard by Khan. And we also have an artifact in hand to trigger Kappa Cannoneer as well. Okay, they just jammed Storm the Festival, so pretty glad that we did bounce the Cavalier there. Let's see what they hit. Oh, interesting, they're on Vorinclex, okay. So that the activated ability on Vorinclex is pretty sick, but... I'm hoping we should just be closing out the game before that really makes much of a difference. Wow, okay. Pretty unlucky on the Thoughtcast there, but we can just bounce the Vorinclex here. Again, we don't care if they get the ETB on that at this point. Can get in for a decent chunk of damage here, and then... Could get an Ornithopter back, could get Spellbomb back off the Emery. I think I prefer Spellbomb, because if we go Spellbomb here, we can bounce their creature at instant speed, and then we can just rebuy... it and do it again the next turn. So if they do play 2 creatures this turn, which I think is pretty likely with the amount of mana that they have, we can just bounce both of them and attack him for lethal. Again, we could have gone Ornithopter to get another 4/4 in play, but I feel like at this point in the game, bouncing their creatures is probably more valuable. So I don't think there's really a best spot to bounce the Cavalier here, right? If we bounce it in response to the trigger, they can still just activate Nykthos in response, so I don't think that really makes too much of a difference. And I would rather have more information, you know, depending on what the second creature they play is. It gives us a bit more information. Not 100% sure. You know, it might have been better to bounce the Cavalier in response. But either way, I think we should just be good here, right? We can bounce the Cavalier, then replay the Spellbomb and bounce their other creature. So yeah, we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And can't keep this hand, too many lands. This one looks a lot better though, right? Pretty tricky to what I want to put back here. I think we definitely want the Retrofit Foundry Emery Rebuke, and it's between Thought Monitor and Frogmite. I think I like putting back the Frogmite here, just because if Emery can survive, then we can usually get stuff back from the graveyard to fuel the Thought Monitor. And if we have Frogmite instead of Thought Monitor, we could run out of top end pretty quickly. So opponent on Gigantha into Guide of Souls. So not 100% sure what that is. Maybe it's just like similar to the old Boros energy deck. Wow, Guide of Souls into Guide of Souls. Oh wow, they have Static Prison as well. That's really bad. Yikes. Okay, I wasn't counting on them having a main deck way on turn 1 to answer the Retrofit Foundry. Wow, okay, yeah, we got pretty punished there. I didn't think, because barely any decks run main deck ways to answer Retrofit Foundry for 1 mana. Obviously, Static Prison is played, Fragment Reality is sometimes played, but those are typically sideboard cards, so yeah, we got really punished there. I don't think we can... I think even if we hadn't got the Retrofit Foundry removed there, we would have struggled to beat Double Guide of Souls into Ajani. That's one of the downsides of being a blue-black artifact deck. Your interaction isn't that great. So here, I think I like Stone of Erech, even though it's much better against the sacrifice decks. Here, it will still stop Ajani from flipping, and if they're on Gigantha rather than Lurrus, I imagine they're also on Flage, and Stone of Erech will just exile Flage if they hardcast it as well. So I think Stone of Erech should still be good, presuming that they're running Flage. And then I like also having Pithing Needle in, just to name Goblin Bombardment as well. I don't think we need both copies of it, but I think the first copy has a lot of value just naming Bombardment, because that's, again, we're very good with this deck of clogging up the ground, so we're pretty good at kind of blanking their attacks with like Ornithopters and Thought Monitors and Retrofit Foundry and stuff like that. But if the game goes long and we're at a reasonably low life total, they can just finish us off with the bombardment. So okay, yeah, this hand looks pretty good. Right, we've got Stone of Erech, we've got Ornithopter, we've got Vault of Whispers, which should help discount the Thought Monitor as well. So I'm going to lead on the Vault of Whispers here, I think. Again, we could get punished if they run Fragment Reality, but if we run out Stone of Erech on turn 1, we still get an Ornithopter out of them. Basically, I think they're more likely to want to fragment the stone in the longer term, right? Even if they defragment the Vault, it is going to be a big tempo loss from us, but we still have 2 lands to be able to play our hand out. Oh, wow, they do have it, and they do choose to take out the stone, so that's not actually too bad for us, because now we're reasonably close to casting Kappa Cannoneer. And getting that down on turn 3, especially on the play, is going to be difficult for them to beat. So I think it's, when we already have one Ornithopter in play, it probably makes sense to just run out the second one as well. Okay, so they go Aether Hub into Amp Raptor. Okay, see what they hit here. Okay, they hit an Ajani. That's pretty good. So here I think we're just going to jam Kappa Cannoneer next turn. Okay, Retrofit Foundry is a good one. Again, there's some, you got to think about whether you want to be more mana efficient and get the artifact in play before the Cannoneer, or hold on to it to trigger it the following turn. But with this Thought Monitor in hand, I think it just makes more sense to just get the Foundry in play beforehand, because then that also discounts the Thought Monitor as well. Should free up more mana for this turn. But yeah, I feel very good about our position here, right? We've got Kappa Cannoneer down, which I very much doubt they have a good way to kill if they are just running kind of like a Boros Energy Shell. We've got Retrofit Foundry into Ornithopters. We've got Spell Bomb to bounce their creatures. We've got Thought Monitor as well. Okay, so Static Prison takes the Foundry. So that, shuts our options down a little bit, but I still think Kappa Cannoneer is just going to be really difficult for them to beat. So we could potentially block here and just attack down the Ajani next turn, but I think, we might as well just take the 2 damage here. We're not really... Obviously, they do have Bombardment, and potentially Flage as well, so they could have good reach, but I don't know. I don't feel like it's worth letting them flip it just because we could kill it with Kappa Cannoneer. I think we can just take the 2 damage. So getting Frogmite down makes the Thought Monitor cheaper. Okay, another stone is really nice here. So we get the stone down. And then we could potentially hold on to the Frogmite to guarantee a trigger for Kappa Cannoneer next turn, but you know, we can draw with the Spell Bomb here. I don't think we need to bounce anything really, so I'm hoping between the Spell Bomb draw and, you know, our next draw step, we should hopefully draw another artifact to trigger the Cannoneer to just get in for lethal. Although having said that, I don't know, we're basically guaranteed lethal next turn anyway, right? If we just get in for 8 and hold on to the Frogmite, maybe that's better actually. Because one way we could just give the opponent a whole extra turn cycle is cracking Spell Bomb and just not finding another artifact in the next top 2. And I don't think we needed this second Frogmite in play as a blocker, really. So, well, having said that, it does also apply pressure on attacks. But yeah, I think the most important thing here is they're basically not going to have any way to remove Cannoneer. So looking back on it, I think I am actually supposed to hold on to Frogmite there just as a guaranteed artifact for next turn. Because if, you know, we leave it at 8/8s, we put them down to 10, and then with Frogmite, even if we don't draw another artifact, we're guaranteed lethal next turn if they use the Sunbaked Canyon, which they kind of have to in this spot. I guess they still have an energy spare, so they could just play like a 1-mana card, but immediately locking them off Sunbaked Canyon producing mana is probably good enough. So yeah, I think I'm supposed to hold Frogmite, but we have so many artifacts, I think we're very likely to find another one. I mean, we find 2 here, so should just be good here, right? Kappa Cannoneer becomes a 10/10, can just attack in. So managed to take game 2 there. I mean, game 1 was just kind of a write-off, right? You need to just get your setup online for this deck to function, and the vast majority of the time it does. So on the draw here, I actually think I prefer Fatal Push to Spellbomb, and thinking about it, I probably should have made that swap last game as well. I just haven't played against kind of like regular energy in quite a while. But yeah, I think Fatal Push is much better, especially because a lot of their stuff does have ETBs. And this, you know, it's more of a mana investment. Aether Spellbomb is essentially 2 mana to bounce something which they can just recast. So I think Fatal Push is better. So this is a 1-lander, which is obviously pretty risky, but we have Foundry into Ornithopter. We have Fatal Push, even if we don't draw another land here. So this hand does have a fail rate for sure, but, you know, another land off the top is good. Fatal Push is live. Emery is live, so, and you know, if we can get Emery to live, which isn't a given, especially against Boros Energy, but if we do, we can start rebuying Ornithopter to feed into the Foundry every single turn, so, and we don't have to worry about, we didn't draw land, so that kind of sucks. Maybe I'm supposed to just jam Emery straight away here, actually, because there's a chance they're waiting for me to attack to use a removal spell, in which case we would be locked out of casting Emery this turn. So didn't end up happening, but I think it would have been better there for me to just jam Emery straight away, or we just have nothing else to do this turn other than Fatal Push. Okay, so pretty happy to mill over 4 non-lands, right? If we hadn't played the Emery there, we would have missed our second land for 4 turns in a row otherwise, so that's kind of fortunate, I guess. So we play another Aether Hub here. We do have decent stuff to loop, though. Oh, they are playing Nerf Galvanic Discharge, and they're going after the 4/4. That has... I don't know if that's a mistake or... well, it's definitely a mistake. I don't know if it was intentional or not, because now we can just replay the Ornithopter with the Emery. I mean, I guess it buys them a bit of time, but it also means they can't use either of their Aether Hubs to pay for mana anymore. If they just used that on the Emery, they'd have still had 2 energy to use with the Aether Hub. Okay, they have another red land, so might not end up mattering here. But yeah, I feel like they definitely should have taken out the Emery there. Wow, Sun Cleanser. Maybe they didn't sideboard correct. I mean, Sun Cleanser hasn't been good since before the energy nerfs, really. And it doesn't do... Maybe they think it stops Kappa Cannoneer, but I believe it only stops counters on players rather than counters on creatures, so... So I think rather than making a 4/4, I think I want to put an extra artifact in play here so that we can enable Kappa Cannoneer more easily. Now I think we're good for Kappa Cannoneer, so I'm just going to get another Ornithopter here, just so we have stuff to feed into the Retrofitter Foundry. Yeah, just checking Sun Cleanser to make sure it wasn't creatures as well. Now we can go Blood Fountain. And now we can play Kappa Cannoneer and keep Retrofitter Foundry untapped as well, which enables us to make a 4/4 at instant speed, which can attack next turn, and also buff the Kappa Cannoneer as well. So I feel pretty good about this spot. Yeah, okay. Opponent just keeps up. So we got there. Nice. Okay, so we're going second here. And yeah, this hand looks decent to me. Right, we've got decent acceleration into Kappa Cannoneer. Obviously going to be our proactive game plan here. Oh wow, Blood Fountain's a sick draw here. That's really good with Kappa Cannoneer, but it also now enables us to cast Frogmite on turn 1 as well. So very fast start here. And this is going to be a turn 2 Kappa Cannoneer by the looks of things, which is really sick. Obviously, if the opponent takes out either of our creatures here, then we might be in trouble. Okay, so it looks like opponent's on the 4-color deck, if I had to guess. Like the Samwise combo. So we could have obviously played out the Spellbomb beforehand, but I really want an artifact in hand here to trigger the Kappa Cannoneer for next turn. So I'm going to hold on to it here because we really do want to give it unblockable, especially when the opponent's just played an Ajani, right? We don't want to give them the opportunity to flip it on defense. Okay, just Birthing Ritual, that's fine. So, I mean, we do obviously have some counterplay to the combo. We actually have both of our main deck counterplay pieces in hand with Spellbomb and Rebuke here, which is pretty nice, but the fact they only have one combo piece now means that we don't really have to worry. You know, I think we should be beating their fair game plan fairly consistently with what we've got here. So just debating whether it's better to play out the second Spellbomb here. It does accelerate our Kappa Cannoneer, but if we don't find another artifact for next turn, we could be in trouble because then it gives the opponent the opportunity to block. I mean, having said that, they don't have great blockers here. Obviously, Cauldron Familiar is nerfed in Historic, so that can't block, and Ajani is a valuable piece for them to have, even without having a cat token. I mean, I guess they've got Cauldron Familiar in play, so if they do find a bombardment or something, they can use that to flip the Ajani still, but you know, I think it's always safe to attack with the Frogmite here. But yeah, now we definitely need to try and find an artifact for next turn. If they don't block, they go down to 10, so I think it's kind of unlikely that we can kill them next turn with the Kappa Cannoneer unless we get very lucky with the draws here. Okay, they do let the damage through, which I think is good for us, right? If we don't use this, you know, we can obviously crack the spell bombs to draw a card if we don't end up using the Metallic Rebuke here. Okay, I was going to say, if they play any combo piece that we can counter, I think we just have to snap off the Rebuke here. Because, you know, if they find a Samwise off the Birthing Ritual, then we're in trouble. Okay, opponent just scoops it up. So Kappa Cannoneer ended up getting us there, which is really good. I think stealing game 1 in this matchup is huge because post-sideboard, I think we get a lot better with the Stone of Iraq and Pithing Needle. I'm just debating whether I think I do want to bring in the full, 2 copies of Pithing Needle. Spellbomb is, you know, okay in this matchup, but a lot of their best cards get value on ECB, whether that's, you know, Ajani, Amped Raptor. Samwise doesn't itself, but it does when you play other cards, which also is awkward with the Spellbomb. So I think in this matchup we're largely relying on our sideboard artifacts like Stone of Iraq and Pithing Needle to kind of nullify their creatures, so we shouldn't need the Spellbomb. And then I think because a lot of their stuff has powerful ETBs, Rebuke is better than Spellbomb as well, you know, especially being able to counter something like a bombardment or a Birthing Ritual is really big as well. So I don't think Spellbomb is, you know, obviously it's useful game 1, just keeping them off the combo, buying us some time, but post-sideboard I think we've got better options. So this hand is a little bit awkward. I would prefer to have, you know, a little bit more early setup and a little fewer top-end cards. Opponent leading with a Haywire Might is pretty awkward here because that can take out our artifact lands for a start. So I think we have to lead on Needle Naming Haywire Might here, which is not ideal really, but that does, you know, prevent them from taking out some of our other cards like Retrofit Foundry or Ornithopter. Here I'm not going to run out the Ornithopter just in case they have a way to remove it. Again, I don't think the 4-card deck really would, or they would probably prioritize taking out the Pithing Needle instead, but here I'm just going to run out the Foundry, Ornithopter, and then Blood Fountain, and then this should enable us to get the Kappa Cannoneer down next turn, but I am a little bit worried here. They've already got Samwise in play. They could just combo off here. So we've just got to hope they don't have the combo and they need to dig towards it. Now, having said that, we do have Thoughtcast, which is useful at digging us to, you know, finding us a Stone of Iraq or another Pithing Needle, which would be really nice, but You know, them having Birthing Ritual will definitely make it difficult for us to race here unless we can find a way to shut their combo off fairly soon. Okay, they found the Johnny, which is obviously kind of scary, but the main thing we're worried about right here is the combo itself from their point of view. Interesting. So we found a Seat of the Synod. I think I'm going to lead on Thoughtcast just in case we find a Pithing Needle or a Stone of Urek. Obviously, we could have played the Kappa Cannoneer first, then the Seat of the Synod to grow it, but I honestly feel like in this spot, finding a Stone of Urek or a Pithing Needle first is more important. And if we could have played it and then still played Kappa Cannoneer afterwards. So I think it's better to go with the Thoughtcast first there, just because if we do find a Stone of Urek, that, you know, buys us a ton of time. Yeah, because now they have Bartolome. If they find a Cauldron Familiar off this Birthing Ritual, we just lose here. So I do think the most important thing in this sort of spot is to try and dig towards... Okay, they didn't find one, which is huge for us. They do flip the Ajani, but we can obviously kill that with the Kappa Cannoneer if we need. So this turn we can still cast Kappa Cannoneer, Thought Monitor, and then potentially cast Stone of Urek or Pithing Needle. So I'm going to lead with that just so we can potentially race. Having said that, that could be a little bit risky, because if we go Thought Monitor and then draw another Thought Monitor, then maybe that then shuts us off potentially digging towards a Stone of Urek. So maybe I'm supposed to lead with the Thought Monitor rather than the Cannoneer in this situation. Okay, it didn't end up mattering. And it's pretty awkward here that we have a tapped blue source. I don't know if I could have tapped better there. Although having said that, we played 2 blue cards this turn, so... I mean, I don't think Rebuke is the be-all, end-all here, because we still lose to them finding Cauldron Familiar off the Birthing Ritual, but... And yeah, looking back on this turn, I think there is a reasonable argument to just going Thought Monitor first, because like I said, if we go Thought Monitor into Thoughtcast or Thought Monitor, then we could have still gone, you know, cast that, draw another 2, and then potentially find a Stone of Urek or a Pithing Needle. So I think it could have potentially been better to run the Thought Monitor out first, just because that opens up more windows for us to find a way to stop the combo here, which is just the most important thing. If we find a Stone of Urek or a Pithing Needle to name Cauldron Familiar, I think it's going to be very difficult for the opponent to beat the Kappa Cannoneers here. Yeah, the opponent doesn't really have good attack, so if they find Familiar off this Birthing Ritual, we lose. And if we'd have found Stone of Urek or Needle first, yeah, okay, they found it. So pretty unfortunate. I think I did misplay. I could have found, or I would have had more opportunities to find a Stone of Urek or Pithing Needle if I'd led with Thought Monitor. It didn't end up mattering because I didn't find another draw 2, but, you know, if I'd gone Thought Monitor, or if I'd gone Kappa Cannoneer, Thought Monitor, and then had no blue mana spare and drawn another draw 2, that could have been the difference between winning or losing, because if I'd cast Thought Monitor first, I could have then gone another draw 2, find a Stone of Urek or Pithing Needle, and then, you know, like you saw, they didn't have good attacks there at all, so as long as we can shut off their combo, they really don't have a great way to win from that point. Flip to Johnny could have maybe got them there if they got a very good draw, but, you know, as you can see, they were really relying on Birthing Ritual to keep the cards flowing there. But game 3 on the play, you know, I feel more optimistic, because if we do find one of our key cards, one of those artifacts that can shut off their combo, I think their deck becomes a lot worse. So this hand's pretty good, right? We don't have a turn 1 Emery, but turn 2 Emery backs up with Metallic Rebuke is still pretty good. And like I said, if we can mill over a Stone of Urek or, you know, maybe a Thought Monitor that we can bring back to dig towards 1, then that would be ideal. And then obviously if we found a Retrofitter Foundry, that would also be great here, because then we can just loot Retrofitter Foundry Ornithopter every single turn. Okay, they do have Fragment Reality, which isn't a massive surprise here. I don't know whether I'm supposed to cast Seat of the Synod here or play Seat of the Synod here, because we've seen the Fragment Reality here. If we had like an Affinity card in hand, then I'd be more inclined to go for that, because then if we found another artifact land off the top, that could help discount it. So, I mean, I'm probably snapping off Rebuke at most things here, but definitely an Amped Raptor, because that can find them basically everything, you know, good. Plus, we'd have to deal with the creature eventually anyway. So definitely get back the Pithing Needle here. There is a temptation to name Goblin Bombardment, but I think just in the dark, I'm going to name Cauldron Familiar here, just because, you know, we can still lose to the combo via Bartolome. Although, having said that, if they sideboard like I do with the deck, they've likely trimmed on Bartolome, so that's less likely. So maybe post sideboard it's better to name Goblin Bombardment here, but I feel at this point when the opponent doesn't have anything in play, it's fairly safe to just name Cauldron Familiar, and then we just don't have to worry about the combo for the rest of the game until they remove it, which is nice. Oh, and we found a Stone of Iraq off the top. That's sick. So it's a bit awkward that they exiled the Ornithopter because we don't have a great card to rebuy with the Emery here. We could preemptively use the Stone of Iraq and get it back for value here, but that then leaves us very vulnerable to Haywire Might or Fragment Reality, because if they go for either of those, then we can just activate it in response and then rebuy it with Emery rather than it getting exiled. And we still have Retrofit a Foundry in play to utilize the mana here, right? It's not like we're wasting our mana entirely. And like I said, if they do go Fragment Reality, oh, they do have the Haywire Might here. So yeah, had we gone activate Stone of Erect, rebuy it, they probably just cast Haywire Might and exile it here, which is pretty bad for us. So here now I think we can activate Stone of Erect if we want to draw a card. Although, no, I think that's fine actually. I think I would rather draw a card here than just make a 1-1. We really want to try and dig towards more action here if we can. So we definitely need to rebuy the Stone of Erect. Maybe it's better to make a token with the Retrofit Foundry instead. I'm not 100% sure, because now we don't have anything to block with, which is a little bit awkward, but I don't know. I still feel like finding a card off the top is more useful. Okay, so they do have the Bombardment, so now I'm kind of regretting naming Familiar off the Pithing Needle. Wow, they don't attack with anything. That has to be a mistake, right? Especially when they have a Bombardment in play and the combo's shut off. Okay, so they're going to kill the Emery here, which makes sense. That is a little bit awkward because now they can obviously use the Haywire Might to take out the Stone of Erect, and then they'll have their Ajani flip back online again. We can use Blood Fountain to rebuy Emery here, which I think is probably just the best line that we have. I don't think it's worth investing mana into the Foundry. Although having said that, actually no, that was probably a misplay on my part. I mean, I don't know. It depends on what we see off the Emery here, but if we wait until the end of the opponent's turn to crack the Blood Fountain, then if they do try and exile it with the Haywire Might, we can crack it in response to draw a card, and then we can replay the Emery the following turn. So now presumably they take out the Stone of Erect with the Haywire Might. But having said that, that's still not a disaster, and if they, if this does help us get Emery online sooner, it might be better. So I'm not 100% sure what was the better line there. But, I mean, now we're in a pretty good spot. They weren't able to kill the Emery, so now we can just get back Thought Monitor here, which is absolutely huge. So, yeah, I mean, in retrospect, it definitely worked out better to play the Emery that turn. Now we find another Thought Monitor. So, yeah, this is the benefit of running, like, 12 really powerful top-end cards. It makes your draw twos a lot better later in the game. And now we've got Ornithopter Retrofit a Foundry. We've still got their combo on lock, which is nice. Obviously, we still have to be concerned about them flipping a Ajani here, but we have a lot of card draw, we have a lot of card filtering off the blood tokens here as well. And then we could play this untapped to be able to, activate Foundry to make a servo and then flip it into a Thopter. But I think we're definitely going to be using one of our Foundries to turn this Thopter into a 4/4 here. So, and then we can obviously just use the other one to make another 1/1. So I don't think we need to play an untapped land here. And I do think with Needle naming Cauldron Familiar, our life total is something that we do need to be thinking about at the very least, because we can still die to Bombardment here, especially in combination with Flip to Ajani. So definitely sacrifice the Ornithopter to make a 4/4. And now even if the... so I'm just trying to debate whether it's best to make another 1/1 or another servo or a Thopter here. Not 100% sure. I think it's close. Servo is obviously more mana efficient, but Thopter gets us closer to the 4/4s and gives us more attackers in the air. So we can just start rebuying Ornithopter here with Emery, which is pretty nice. Just helps us apply pressure. And the opponent's already down at 10 as well, so they're definitely on the back foot in this situation. So we're going to attack him with the 4/4 and the 2/2/2s. Obviously, this does enable them to, crack the Unlucky Witness, but I'd rather force it here, right? They can crack the Unlucky Witness at any time, whereas this kind of forces them to do it now if they want to soak up the damage. Okay, pretty bad hits for the opponent, which is obviously great for us. We put them down to 6, and then I think we just bring back Ornithopter again. You know, just keep applying the pressure. Keep making 4/4s. Because they've only got 2 creatures in play here, right? They can play the second Samwise and get 2 food tokens, but they can only crack 1, and they've got 2 Confluences in play, which is really awkward as well. So, yeah, opponent just scoops it up, so we got there, nice.